good to see so many of you still here. Some of you may have noticed, because you're very perceptive, that I'm not Chris Cremidis Courtney. I'm sorry about that. Chris, unfortunately, is ill, and so he asked me, because he knows that I'm a jazz musician in my spare time, to improvise the moderation of this session. So since what I know about this topic is relatively concise, and that's an understatement, it'll be a masterclass in minimalist moderation. Our first speaker comes to us live from Kyiv, and we thought it was really important at this time to have somebody from Ukraine who's right in the thick of it. Valeriya Ionan is Deputy Minister for European Integration at the Ministry of Digital Transformation. So she is the person who's been putting together some of these extraordinary tools that Ukraine has used for the resilience of society, to fight the Russians in the digital area, to ready an army of drones and various other things. She will talk to us about that. Before she went into politics, she was an entrepreneur in the tech sector, and a management consultant who did both management consultancy and technology. And she's also got an extraordinary record. She swam across the Bosporus. Now, the Turks used to joke that, you know, you die of poisoning before you get time to drown, but she somehow survived that, so congratulations on that. And she's also a boxer and a member of the White Collar Boxing League, so watch out. Valeriya, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon to everyone, and thank you so much for this introduction. I am so sorry that I cannot be there offline together with you, have some things to do here in Kyiv, but I'm so grateful to you for this invitation. So I believe you all know Ukraine is a brave nation fighting for its future and freedom over months and years, and that's who we are, real life fighters. But 3 years ago, when our Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine was established, we have started as dreamers. So let's take a look at our achievements till February 24th happened. Next slide, please. So first, we created a vision. We want to build the most convenient digital state in the world without corruption, without bureaucracy, and absolutely paperless. And for that, we have created an ecosystem of digital projects, which is called DIA. And DIA has 5 main projects. The first one is the mobile application DIA, which is used by more than 18 million of Ukrainians. The second one is a state portal DIA, where we are digitizing all the public services. Then DIA City, special economic and tax regime for IT companies. DIA Digital Education, an educational project for developing digital literacy and skills, and DIA Business, a national program on the development of SMEs. Next slide, please. So let's stop for a moment on DIA. DIA application is our core product, as I have mentioned, which is used by more than 18 million of Ukrainians. We have more than 14 digital documents which are available in the application, and more than 25 public services, which are most popular and also available in the application. By the way, Ukraine is the first country in the world where digital passport is a full equivalent of paper and plastic one. And thanks to DIA application, we actually had the opportunity to launch quickly new services during the wartime, but I will tell a little bit more about this later. Next slide, please. Another project, as I've mentioned, is the DIA Business, which is the project on the development of SMEs, and which has 2 components. The first one is the one-stop shop for future and existing entrepreneurs, which offers more than 80 different products and services, including free consultations on how to establish or run the business, big export section, marketplace of financial products, export section, impact investment platform, free online school for entrepreneurs, and many others. So you name it, and you will definitely find it on this platform. By the way, you can register your business in Ukraine through DIA platform only in 10 minutes. So it's the fastest business registration in the world. Next slide. The second component of this project is actually the network of offline hubs, which are available throughout the country. So there are 11 centers of support for entrepreneurs, for SMEs, which where now free consultations are available and also free educational projects are available, and people and entrepreneurs come there to find new clients, partnerships, and investments. And during the wartime, those centers are extremely important, especially when it comes to help businesses with relocation and start from the scratch. Next slide, please. Speaking very briefly about digital education, we all believe that it is impossible to build a digital state if people will not have enough digital literacy and digital skills. This is something that makes us competitive in the real world. So we have a special educational platform where series in edutainment format are available. They are also in micro-learning format and in stop lessons format. So everyone, starting from people of elegant age and ending up with kids and scholars, can learn digital skills and digital literacy in a very fun and very efficient way, I would say. We are also now upgrading the platform by ML instruments and AI instruments. So we are working on offering our users and individual educational trajectories. And very soon, a new section on reskilling, upskilling, and employment will be launched in order to help internally displaced people in Ukraine. Next slide, please. So for now, we have more than 1.5 million registered. We call this platform as the Netflix, but better. And also we have a second component of this project, which is the points of access to the internet and gadgets, which is also especially important nowadays. So people can come to those places and learn through our platform. Next slide, please. Dia City. Dia City is a special legal and tax base for IT companies. It is one of the best tax systems in the world. We have started this project 2 weeks before the war started. And for now, we have 360 plus companies who are residents of Dia City. And this number continues to grow even during the war. Next slide, please. Among them, there are well-known Ukrainian and international companies like Reface, Revolut, Monobank, Makpo, Ajax, and many others. Dia City will contribute to the transformation of Ukraine into the largest European IT hub. It's really a favorable tax system, namely 18% income tax or 9% tax on withdrawn capital, personal income tax 5%, and 1.5 military levy. So actually, if you would be interested or your company would be interested to become a resident of Dia City, we would be glad to welcome you on board. Next slide, please. We have also managed to create a platform of registries. So all data stored in secure registries. So our ecosystem of digital services is cyber secure. Creation and maintenance of new registries using the platform is possible by a team of 3 people. No third-party developers are needed to develop new registers. So this platform is built on open source software that does not require license fees. And we are very grateful for the opportunity to work with different countries within the framework of the GovStack initiative. Next slide, please. So this is how we actually, and what we have achieved, and it's a very small part before the February 24th. And when the war started, Dia continued to serve people. And I want to continue with explanation of a few major projects that help us to stay resilient from the very first day of the war. Next slide, please. So in Dia application, we have launched a couple of new services. For example, the possibility to obtain an internally displaced person status, then a financial assistance to IDPs, then the help to the army, donations to the army that are also available through Dia application. We have also launched Dia TV and Dia Radio in the application, so Ukrainians can have 24/7 access to truthful news. And also Ivorok, which is a special chatbot with the help of which people could inform us about Russian troops, Russian equipment, and recently the function of demining was added. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So just a couple of moments about Ivorok, for example. More than 500 case applications were received through the chatbots, which helped our armed forces to know about the location of Russian troops or equipments, and this chatbot has an authorization through DIA application. So we have developed it very fast, just in a couple of days, and this instrument was really and is really efficient for us right now. Next slide, please. This is the first cyber war, and defending our digital borders is also a crucial thing. In this regard, the IT army of Ukraine was created. We have more than 300,000 cyber specialists who work on a daily basis to defend and to attack Russian governmental portals and other Russian institutions. Next slide, please. One of other very important solutions is satellite internet, which became a part of our new critical infrastructure and in many ways has changed the course of war and rebuilding process of liberated territories. So we, for now, probably have the majority, the biggest quantity of Starlinks in Ukraine, but we still need more. So that's why we are asking for our partners to support. We still need at least 10,000 Starlinks for Ukraine. Next slide, please. At some point of war, our ministry has cooperated closely with the military to understand the needs and what else we can do to support our armed forces. And that's how one of our top projects came up, which is Army of Drones. So drones became part of Ukraine's winning strategy. And the role of our ministry is to coordinate, to build a comprehensive system and to ensure our army has enough drones. Please, next slide. And also, just recently, we have started to assemble the world's first fleet of naval drones through the United 24 initiative. So if you would be interested to get more information or to become a part of this project, please go to United 24 portal and we will be ready to cooperate with you on that. Next slide. So, as I have mentioned, even during the war, we continue to develop our IT industry, and DIA City continues to grow every day with new residents. Next slide, please. And we continue to ask ourselves about what's next, what could be the future for Ukraine. We definitely want to become the biggest European IT hub, and we already have some top-notch GovTech solutions that we are ready to share with the world, like for example, DIA. Please, next slide. And we already have some great examples. For example, we are cooperating with the Polish government, making an integration between our DIA application and mObyvatel. And just recently, an MOU between Ukrainian government and Estonian government was signed. And Estonian government is taking our DIA code base to develop its own MVP for digital documents, and I hope that very soon we could show our mutual developments in this matter. Please, next slide. Also, just recently, our parliament has adopted the law on e-residency. So e-residency is a project for foreign entrepreneurs and creative leaders to have an opportunity remotely operate their businesses in Ukraine, open bank accounts and pay taxes under very favorable conditions. So very soon, people all over the world could become Ukrainians. And I hope that we could share some more information just in a few weeks about this project with you. Next slide, please. And I actually have a great video which I have prepared for you regarding the Ukrainian vision on 2030, and I would kindly ask the tech team to help me with this video.
Сьогодні вранці президент Путін оголосив проведення спеціальної військової операції на Донбасі. Росія здійснила удари по нашій військовій інфраструктурі.
Let's look 8 years ahead. 2030. The history of the new Ukraine is studied all over the globe. Why? Because Ukraine became the most digital and convenient country in the world. Scripts have replaced bureaucrats. 500,000 former public servants are successfully integrated in the new economy. No more red tape, but paperless. No more banknotes, but cashless. Yes, we became the first country to abandon paper money. Ukraine now has the best tech system for the IT industry and the most affordable e-residency. Thanks to Ukrainian engineers and programmers, the R&D centers of the world's top technology companies operate successfully, and Ukraine ranks first in the world by the number of startups per capita. Ukrainian courts are guided by artificial intelligence, and all notarial acts take place online. Ukrainian customs is fully automatic and the fastest in the world. Customs clearance and car registration can now be done in 3 clicks from your smartphone. Because of war and internal migration, we have built the most flexible and modern digital education. Brave military and civilians get quality treatment with modern remote monitoring and e-health systems. Ukraine also has the most effective cyber defense in the world. After the horrors of 2022, Ukraine focused on security systems. Now every production facility has its air defense system, and the sleep of Ukrainians is protected by an ultra-modern iron dome. The Ukrainian government is digital, more like an IT company in terms of the efficiency of implementing decisions, and one can register a land plot, start construction, open a business or get a license, and register a car or real estate from a smartphone, automatically, in 1 click. Ukraine is the freest and digital. This is all because international partners and the world's leading technology companies supported the Digital for Freedom initiative and united to help Ukraine recover through digitalization. Building a new Ukraine together, free and the fastest, brave and digital.
Thank you, Valeriya. That's extraordinary. Is that your presentation? Are we done? Can I ask you a question or two?
Yes, it is. I would be very glad to answer a question. The only thing, there is the last slide with my contacts, if in case someone needs it and would like to send me a message.
Let's do that now.
Answer it.
Let's see that last slide with your contacts, because everybody's poised with their pen and piece of paper, or they're going to take a picture of it. Oh, it's a black space.
The next one. The next slide.
Right. That's what it is. It's a QR code. I thought it wouldn't be a sort of phone number or an email. I'm too 20th century.
I can tell my phone number too, but it would be better.
Valeriya, thanks so much. That's an extraordinary vision that you've laid out for us there. And an extraordinary illustration of the principle that necessity is the mother of invention. And to see how Ukraine, under the fire of war, has been able to develop so much of that so fast is really quite mind-bending. So my question, I suppose, is how do you plan to get from where you are today to where you want to be in 2030? You're still at war. We don't know. You may be at war for quite a long time yet. How do you get there?
Well, first of all, I would say that a lot of things that are in video are either already implemented or already in progress. So we just plan not to stop and to have the same speed as before the war, to continue, help our armed forces and defend our country, and on the other hand, to continue to develop new services and to continue to digitize all the country. I don't know if you are aware, but in Ukraine we have a special position which is called CDTO, Chief Digital Transformation Officer. So we have Chief Digital Transformation Officer operate under level of deputy ministers or deputy governors. So this is special people who are responsible for digitalization in their own industry. And thus we have CDTOs in every ministry, in every governmental agency, and in every regional council. And that's exactly why our minister has the status of Vice Prime Minister, because he has the possibility to coordinate all of the plans and activities in digital transformation on national and regional level. And this helps us to digitize country fast and efficiently. So, of course, we are doing everything what we can do from our side by moving forward and developing new things. But of course, it is very important for us, the topic of cooperation between governments, cooperation with business, with big tech companies. And we also rely on your support, Ion, and on cooperation, tight cooperation between governments and private sector. We believe that the success lies in the center. We all have to be together and stand together to achieve great results.
Couple of quick questions. What do you do for elderly people who find it challenging to deal with digital and online things? I mean, I've had parents who had that problem, and I know many people here have that experience of an older generation that just finds it hard to cope with the digital transformation.
So we have a separate program for elderly people on digital literacy, which is available on the platform and also on other gadgets. We have special hubs, and we have facilitators who are ready and who are educated enough to facilitate the first touch between a person of an elegant age and, let's say, a gadget or the platform, of course. And we are also working on communication campaigns to engage children and grandchildren to help us communicate this. And we are also doing lots of services in DIA. For example, financial assistance. When COVID started, we had launched financial assistance through DIA application. So everyone who got vaccinated could get a financial assistance through the application. And that also motivated people to download the application and to make first steps for digital world.
Great. Final question, if I may. Obviously, by creating this IT army, you're sort of blurring the lines, if you were, between combatants and civilians. How do you deal with that in terms of regulating it? What are the rules of engagement, and how do you prevent people who may be in another country doing some hacking online when they're not at work from being caught up as combatants in a war and becoming legitimate targets themselves?
I think that this is the first war in the human history which you can witness online and in details. And nowadays, every person who has access to digital technologies and internet are becoming witnesses of this war. And the big thing is that everybody can contribute to the victory of Ukraine in the war against Russia. And this applies to creating and joining volunteer initiatives, joining the IT army that you've mentioned, informing important news and fundraising. So I think that, yes, it definitely blurs the line, but what is our future? It's phygital and it's digital. So, and here we have an opportunity to see it because of the war more quicker.
Okay, well, thank you so much for that presentation. You better get back to your day job, but I'd ask the audience to express their thanks to you for... Well, the second part of this session is going to be partly in presence, but also interactive, because we have a member of the Ukrainian Parliament online. As we've heard, this is a new kind of war, 21st century, perhaps the first 21st century war that has been a sort of a whole of society war, where we've seen forms of hybrid warfare, whether it be in the form of cyber intrusions, disinformation campaigns, energy blackmail, supply chain and critical infrastructure manipulations or destruction. And they're testing our resilience in all liberal democracies, not just in Ukraine. And we're seeing also the kind of economic, political, and societal damage that can be caused by these hybrid operations. And this is only going to amplify with the increasing accessibility and sophistication of emerging and disruptive technologies. So we've got a big challenge ahead of us, and we don't, what the world's going to look like in 8-10 years' time, Well, you saw the Ukrainian version there of what Valeriya wants Ukraine to look like in 10 years' time. It's a big transformation. It's going to happen very fast. And it has a lot of implications, you know. And Ukraine has shown how enabling a smartphone, for example, and enabling a smartphone user to engage in actions that can result in significant impacts on the battlefield. You know, who would have thought that was possible a couple of years ago? So that's changing things. It raises questions for us. What lessons can we learn from Ukraine's success, from its digital resistance to Russian aggression? How can we use that to enhance the resilience of our societies here in Europe? The advances in emerging disruptive technologies such as artificial intelligence, extended reality, they're going to present a series of challenges for democratic governance, and I hope Kavya will talk to us about that when she comes up. Given that a large portion of our critical infrastructure in Europe and in North America is in the hands of the private sector, looking at you, Richard Pearlman, you know, what do we need to do to have the kind of relationships between the private sector and government that make sure that those infrastructures are secure, robust, resilient? And finally, you know, this transformation of warfare and security into a whole of society phenomenon, as seen in Ukraine, it does blur these traditional dividing lines. So what do we do about that? You know, when's a civilian no longer a civilian? And what does that mean for the laws of war, international humanitarian law, and so on? So lots of questions to discuss. Great panel. I'll ask you to come up in the order that you're called. So first and foremost, I would call Kavya Pearlman. She is founder and CEO of the XR, Extended Realities Safety Initiative. She's come all the way from Silicon Valley to be with us, and she is kind of in this partnership with Friends of Europe. She is creating a bridge between the valley and the bubble. And that's what we're trying to do here at Friends of Europe. Next up, I will invite Boris Andrijanič, who was Minister of Digital Transformation in Slovenia and is now a member of the governing board of the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. In Kiev, if the technology is working, we have Kira Rudik, and Kira is a member of the Ukrainian Parliament, the Rada. She's also vice president of the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats in Europe, and she was a tech entrepreneur in virtual reality before she went into politics. But I can't see her on the screen. Can you? There, yeah, she's right behind me. Where is he, kiddies? Behind you. Great. And last but certainly not least, Richard Spearman, Senior External Affairs Advisor for Security and Resilience at Vodafone Group, a private sector company that owns a lot of our infrastructure on which we depend, and we'll talk about that. So first of all, Kavya, if you could set the scene for us about what the challenges are coming down the pike from AI and extended reality.
So, thank you.
Joyce.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. So, I have to start with the European values, and I think we can all agree on that we would like to uphold them. The reason why I'm here all the way from the United States trying to build this bridge is I don't have much of a hope in the United States solving the issue of privacy. And so I am bringing my voice here looking to Europe. I mean, I'm just really, this is the truth. We don't even have a federal privacy law. So first we have to think about what does the future look like and why we want to have this conversation around privacy, safety, security, ethics. The word is convergence. It's not the metaverse. It is literally the convergence of several different technologies that we need to address. We need to understand them and that we need to figure out how do we actually address these things today while building a better future for tomorrow. So one of the things that I saw in the Ukrainian 2030 vision is digitization. And I saw a lot of keywords. One thing that I think is missing, which you will probably see emerge, is immersive. The next iteration of the internet, whether you call it the metaverse or any other word, it is immersive. It is what is bringing the convergence of artificial intelligence, extended reality, brain-computer interfaces. It is going to revolutionize the way we receive healthcare. People, literally, doctors, having the ability to visit you in an avatar form, in a holographic form. So that's the convergence that we are confronting. Now, what can Europe do about this, these challenges? Let's talk about the challenges, and I'll just briefly touch on some of the research. So back in 2016, I was advising Facebook for third-party security risks, and we know Cambridge Analytica happened in 2016. Cambridge Analytica, Alexander Nix actually touted about it in some of the conferences, had 5,000 data points on each American. And we know potentially those data points were used to influence behavior of Americans. Now think about this. 2019, Stanford University conducted a research about virtual reality. With the use of virtual reality, now you can have over 2 million unique body recordings on each and every individual. 5,000 data points, over 2 million unique body recordings and data points and body markers. XRSI itself, we're conducting a research on authentication, authenticating humans in XR, in virtual augmented reality. In less than 20 seconds, we can accurately establish who you are with utmost, almost 90% accuracy, or we're trying to hack it to make sure it's safe. So what does it mean? There are 3 things that I think are really important here that Europe can contribute to. We need to be prepared for the future. We need effective laws. What are effective laws? Well, we already have GDPR. We are getting Digital Service Act, Digital Marketing Act. But let me tell you, our team of advisors, over 160 of them, have studied these things. They are inadequate. For the future, they will not protect us. Why? Because we're not just talking about privacy here. We're talking about our sense of autonomy, the ability to make decisions. The disinformation, misinformation, it influences our ability. That means what is really threatened is not just our privacy, it's our free will. It's our agency. It's whether am I the one making the choice or is somebody nudging me to make that choice for me. It's our ability to vote in the way we want. So that's what is at stake. And so effective lawmaking needs to be way more granular, that not just says, hey, I'll take 4% of your revenue if you don't behave this way or guard data that way. No, it needs to be granular guidance to engineers that tells code this way. Safety by design means what for an engineer? So informing the Valley how they need to code. Second thing is we need to really educate people what's coming. The Valley would continue to push this technology upon us. Pretty soon, and mark my words, you will be ordering the Uber using augmented reality glasses. And that will happen. On that day, you are really allowing companies to get your real estate of your attention. They're gathering then your gaze data, your pose data, your pupil dilation. And that's where things get really, really tricky. So what do we need to do? We need to create a sense of awareness. Earlier, Paul, you were saying that what is the then difference between the militarization and the civilians? That means we have to be the troopers to safeguard our agency, our autonomy, the kind of decisions we make. And so that's why I'm here to really build this bridge, bring that knowledge. And when we come to awareness, we are conducting a intervention, and we'll continue to. One of the first intervention, as you know, I'm here, we'll mention is Metaverse Safety Week. It's taking place on 10th to 15th of December. This is the third time we are trying to bring speakers all the way from the White House. We have an astronaut, we have congresswomen. We are asking lots of these senators, academics, many stakeholders, researchers, to step into virtual reality. It's a 5-day thing focusing on healthcare, children's safety, focusing on processing of the new payment types like the decentralized payment infrastructure. Human rights that's where we will start. 10th of December is a Human Rights Day. So we will hear from Human Rights Commissioner of Australia. And the reason it is taking place, all these 5 days, is happening in virtual reality. I invite you. So when the stakeholders step into VR, step into these immersive technologies, they will create different memories. And now the same congresswoman is involved in Children Online Privacy Act reform, COPPA reform. So when they go back, now they understand the technology better. So these are the kind of intervention that you can look to Friends of Europe and XRSI leading together to bridge this gap that exists currently between what the Valley is pushing out and what knowledge is necessary to finally have these pragmatic laws, the granular precision laws.
Thank you very much. Next, we're going to move on to Mark. And Mark, my question to you, I guess, is where is AI going? And what do we need to beware of? And is the EU trying to regulate the right things in the right way?
That's a big question. I hope we have
You've got 5 minutes.
Oof.
Big questions.
First of all, thanks
I could have
for
asked
a great
a small question,
question.
you'd still have 5 minutes.
All right. First of all, it's great to be among so many friends of Europe and digital enthusiasts. Let me first draw a couple of lessons that I think are super relevant for the broader technology debate. These lessons, of course, come from the Ukraine war. Number one being that Ukrainians are not just incredibly courageous defenders of freedom and democracy, but also a digital force that should be reckoned with. The second important lesson is that it's good to be big, but it's even better to be smart. Now, we see in this conflict that size, of course, matters, but it's not the decisive factor. And I think that's a great thing. What's winning this war is superior leadership, training, technology, and of course, motivation. And I think this lesson is very relevant and will help us navigate the new tech Cold War that has already started between the world's democracies and autocracies. However, our problem is that China is both big and smart when it comes to pursuing its tech supremacy. In the area of 5G, they are already far ahead. But I think it's the AI race that will determine the winners and losers of tomorrow's business as well as geopolitics. Now let's draw some comparisons that relate to data, talent, and of course funding of AI projects. When it comes to data, everyone knows that Chinese internal market is second to none. 1.4 billion Chinese produce more high-quality data than all of Europeans and Americans combined. So if data really is the oil of today's economy, then of course China is the Saudi Arabia of the 21st century. And this of course translates into services that are AI-driven and operate at tremendous scale. Let's look at, for example, voice recognition. Apple's Siri has around 500 million users. Chinese iFlyTech has over 700 million. The second factor is talent, and I cannot emphasize this one enough. Every year, twice as many STEM students graduate in China as in Europe and the US combined. Already today, Chinese researchers produce as many AI publications as their European and US counterparts. And these publications are getting better by the year. And the same goes for the number of supercomputers, and I can go on and on and on. Now, of course, none of this is a coincidence. This is a result of a very conscious strategic decision at the very top of the Chinese nation. The AI has been placed as one of the top strategic priorities for China many years ago. And this has unlocked significant public funds, and it has also encouraged a lot of private investments. Now, of the global venture capital investing in AI, nearly half of it ends up in Chinese startups. What can we do about it? Obviously, we'll never be as big as China, but we can and we must be smarter than we are today. First of all, we need to wake up and smell the coffee. We need to acknowledge that Europe is lagging behind, not just Europe, not just the US, but also when it comes to China. Second of all, we need to understand that we cannot make it on our own. We need strong transatlantic partnership on AI development and deployment, as well as regulation. We also need a broader collaboration with other world's democracies. And, this is also important, we need to work closer with our own tech industry. The next thing is, of course, talent. We simply need to produce more STEM graduates. And here, I think we should especially focus on women, and I've been working a lot on this in the European and national context as a minister. At the same time, we need to be much more open when it comes to attracting top AI and broader tech talent to Europe in the years to come. And then, of course, it's funding. We should really put our money where our mouth is. We have beautiful strategies at the EU and national levels, but you know what Winston Churchill said about strategies. He said, no matter how beautiful the strategy, one should occasionally look at results. So we should really increase funding, both on the public and the private front. Now, let me finish with another lesson from the Ukraine war. We really learned that nothing is inevitable and that nothing is impossible. And despite the fact that we might not be winning the AI race at the moment, together with our partners, I think we still have a decent chance to do so. Thank you.
Quick question to you. Thank you. Great presentation. Is your solution with China disconnection, collaboration, or a combination of the two?
It's always a combination of the two. It's a great question. Actually, I can give you a very interesting data point. There's never been more collaboration between Chinese researchers and European and American researchers in the area and in the area of AI as today, which is definitely an encouraging sign. And we need to work with China to set global standards and norms, not just in the area of AI, but also cybersecurity and other tech-related areas that are of our common interest. So I definitely advocate for a strong dialogue when it comes to technology with China. We must say that the recent meeting of G20 in Bali offered some glimmers of hope. Xi Jinping himself emphasized that there's a need for greater cooperation when it comes to tech regulation and technology in general. So that keeps me hopeful. But at the same time, we need to develop our own capabilities. Yeah. This goes without saying.
Great, thank you. Kira, we're going to go to Ukraine next, and you've heard a lot of admiration for what Ukraine has done in these last months and these last years, indeed, to put itself in a position to defend itself against the might of Russia, including through digital transformation. Just give us, I mean, to you, what are some of the lessons from Ukraine on digital democracy that we here in Western Europe and around Europe can learn?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure being here virtually. Probably the main lesson that we have learned in terms of digitalization is you have to take care of your security, because when you are at war with one of the largest countries in the world and with a huge capacity, including technological capacity, you need to make sure that your back is covered. And this comes through the legislation and ability to protect your data on the governmental level and also on the execution of this legislation. So if you ask me what we should have done earlier, probably the first thing would be we would have the additional protection for the systems in our critical infrastructure and government registries earlier. However, Valeriya and her team have done a fantastic job, probably unbelievable job in making sure that we are where we are right now. So I want to go up a couple of abstractions here, because everything that we are discussing in terms of the future, of the digitalization, of the threats and risks and how the countries need to collaborate goes through one issue that is not defined yet. And this issue has been there before the war that Russia on Ukraine started. And the issue is that there is no concrete view on how the world's security system needs to look like. Because everything that we are discussing today goes down to the question on, we will create all those fantastic laws, pieces of legislation that would probably work, but how are we going to enforce them? How are we going to enforce international laws on China? How are we going to enforce international laws on Russia? How are we going to deal with the threats and attacks that we are experiencing right now and will be experiencing in future? And the answer to that lies not in the tech sector, it lies in geopolitical answers to those questions. If we are building the new digital system for Europe that will mimic or be very similar to what we have in Ukraine right now, which is already happening in Poland, in Estonia, in many other countries, and I think it's a great progress and a great moving ahead. However, the question is Hungary going to be allowed into the system? Is Serbia going to be allowed into the system? How are we going to deal with attempts to break the system? And who will be in charge of charging the attempts to break the system? Who is going to be responsible for protection of the data in the system? Is it a local government or is it a European level? We were discussing these questions and potential answers to them with many parties and leaders from the liberal parties of Europe on different gatherings, and there were many good answers, bad answers, and many developments in this matter. However, at some point, it all bumps into one question on how are we going to enforce our decisions on the countries that do not be collaborative. I have recently visited Taiwan. That has been a great help to Ukraine since the beginning of the war. That has actually is fighting a similar fight, and they are fighting a huge fight in terms of the cyber war with China right now. But Taiwan really wants to be involved and integrated into the discussion of how the democracies of the whole world are collaborating together to create the system that would protect everybody. But the answer to that is also unclear, because there is no understanding of, okay, if we are building this group of democratic countries, who is in and who is out, and who is defining that? And is there a leader in the room who would be able to move with this question quickly? Because the issue that we are facing has been on the table for a while. And the absence of the answer has led us to the situation where the tyrannies of the world are rising, and they are feeling very strong right now. And the fight that Ukraine and Ukrainian people are fighting right now and winning right now is something that may have been repeated somewhere else, and probably will be repeated somewhere else if the proper decisions will not be made. Every single time when when we are bumping into geopolitical issues that are still not resolved and still do not have the answer for, and that are the blockers for the proper legislation, for the proper bills and strategies that should be in place. I'm remembering this question, that, what is the worst and the most scary thing when you are looking for an adult in the room and you realize that you are an adult in the room. And this is why, what we see in the short term in terms of digitalization, that we will basically be expanding what we already have in Ukraine, working with our partners, chunk by chunk, step by step, on a will and way basis, making sure that we do what is within our capacities. But I want everybody to keep in mind that before we solve this main critical problem of who is in and who is out, and how are we building the security system for our future, we will not be strategically successful. Yeah. The tyrannies will be strategically successful, and we want democracies to prevail.
Well, can I ask you then, throw that question back at you and say, if you were the dictator of the free world, as it were, which is in itself, of course, a non sequitur, but if you were in charge, who would be in and who would be out?
First of all, I would ask who wants to be in and create the rules of what the New Democratic Alliance mean, what to be a member of New Democratic Alliance would mean for the countries.
Right.
And it will include economical, energy-wise, security, cyber agreements. So it needs to be a complex solution.
Criteria-based.
Yes.
Based on criteria.
Yes, absolutely.
Rather than on membership of an organization, say.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
Just one more question, if I may, and then we're going to take our final panelist and give you in the audience your 15 minutes of fame, maybe more than 15 minutes of fame, 25 minutes maybe, to ask questions. For most of my lifetime, what kept the global peace, and of course there have been plenty of little wars, but what kept the global peace was a balance of terror. It was deterrence. Is there such a thing as deterrence, in your view, in the cyber area? In other words, do you think that there are things that haven't happened in this war because each side knew that the other side could deal much more severe blows to them? Or is it a free-for-all and there's no deterrence in cyberspace?
I think we are right now at this middle-aged story where the deterrents in cyberspace are minimal. They are based on, as Mark said, on on who is smarter, and but again, on anybody smart, there is somebody who is a little bit smarter or who can gather 5 smart friends. So the deterrence right now is based on advancement of the technology, but the things are moving as fast, and they are so, and because of the anonymity that you can get, they basically are giving up on any kind of prevalence that can be done by the new technologies available.
Thank you. We'll come back to you for the questions from the floor, if you can stay with us. Richard Pearlman, you've been very patient. You represent the private sector here in this conversation, and the private sector happens to own most of this critical infrastructure. And we've seen in the last few weeks that we can suddenly be surprised with attacks on the critical infrastructure. So what does protecting critical infrastructure look like going forward? What is the relationship that you need to have with government, with perhaps with users as well? And are you getting there? And perhaps a little bit more also, since we've looked into virtual reality and so on, what does the infrastructure of the future look like? Is it still underwater cables and landlines and so on, or what is it?
Thanks very much, and thanks for the invitation. It's really good to be here. I work for Vodafone, so we're the downstream sort of provider part of the market in this space, and it's good that you've asked me to sort of comment on how we're doing and what private companies are doing to secure our infrastructure and what we might need to do better with government. Vodafone, just some background to sort of so you know very quickly from where I speak. So Vodafone has operating companies in 21 countries and many partner markets, including a Vodafone Ukraine. More than 300 million customers, 159 million IoT devices connected. It's not just about connectivity, it's also about finance. So our operation in Kenya last year in M-Pesa with Safaricom, we had 19.9 billion transactions on that platform, carrying a significant percentage of the economic activity. We're also innovating as well as consuming in the technology space, working with partners on the development of Open RAN as part of the efforts to diversify the supply chain, which I'll come back to in a minute. So for me, I think it's important to note that critical infrastructure, and it's really interesting that the title had critical infrastructure in it, because in most countries that I visit to talk to governments about it, it's critical national infrastructure. And one of the questions we've got to ask about this in the future, I think, is to what extent will critical infrastructure in the end be international, and to what extent can it be? And I think what's happened in Ukraine with the combination of Starlink and efforts by many in the country with cooperation from a number of companies to put quite a lot of that incredible stuff that was being talked about in terms of Ukrainian government into the cloud, so that it's physically sort of out of reach and replicable, and it still needs to be accessible on the ground, which is where the sort of the last few miles come in, and the operators need to be involved. But there are definite alternative realities, if I may steal that phrase, for the future, I think, using cloud architecture and new architectures and new ways of collaborating internationally. And just to finish that point, I think, interestingly, we are asked from time to time, I was asked very recently by a government, so can you assure me, as a critical national infrastructure provider, can you assure me that if you lost the network in your country, in our country now, that you would be able to turn it on again from within the country? And I thought it was a really interesting question, because it reflects government's preoccupation with their nation state, which is entirely right, for their citizens protecting that. But the answer that we gave was, is that all you'd want? Because ultimately resilience, which is one of the key planks of what we need to improve and continue to develop, is we can do it in multiple places now, and so we could bring it up in other places and then port it to you in your country. So I think we all need to think more broadly about the possibilities of doing things differently, I would say. So the stuff here that's very, to critical national infrastructure providers, the stuff here that's very familiar. So we've been regulated because we're critical infrastructure for many years. We've got links with governments. We've got mechanisms. So there are already some challenges, some channels sort of established and functioning. The challenge about security and resilience, which are two separate but very closely linked things, is also not new for us. So our operating right to exist, is there because we're secure, resilient, and we through that we generate consumer and government trust. If we didn't have government trust or consumer trust, we'd lose our license. So security and resilience are not new. Being CNI and having government involved is not new. But there are some different facets now which we need to. Which is why we need to change. And the first thing I'm going to say is a comment, not a proposal. I think pace is something that the Ukraine experience has really, and COVID for that matter, has really brought home to us all. I think we all need to be working with greater urgency. And I think we've got to remember that we all function and will always function on different clocks. So it's always likely that legislation is going to follow the development of technology, and it's going to take longer. Innovation is always going to be in tension with the desire to get the product to market, but have it safe before it goes. But that is a key requirement, that it is safe before it goes. And then, of course, you've got to remember our bad actors, our enemies, don't really have clocks. They live in a parallel universe. They don't have regulation. They don't have compliance audits. They don't have all those sorts of things going on. And we're never going to align all of those clocks, but we really need to get them closer together, because otherwise we will be ceding a significant example to the bad advantage to the bad actors. So sense of urgency really important. New tech presents some different risks and potentially makes existing risks worse. And we need to look at those things slightly separately, I think, if we're going to get this right. We need to ensure going forward as a solution, we've talked a bit here already, panelists, about the need for products and services to be both secure and resilient. And this privacy and security by design, getting the privacy and security and the human concerns in at the beginning of the process before production. I know there's tension between allowing innovation-free reign, but when you're moving towards products and services, I think you really need to make absolutely certain that you've got your security and privacy lined up, baked in from the beginning, because that saves you so many problems. It's the right thing to do, and it also saves you problems down the line. We do need to prioritise and support standards work. I know it's not, it's not the most exciting, but it's really, really important. It's an investment in the future. And just finally, on public-private partnership, because I'm getting the time signal here, there is already public-private partnership, but I believe it needs to be transformed, and it needs one other member in the room. It needs to have a societal element, the third estate. We need to talk to people. I'm always struck at these conferences by the urgency that we all feel compared with the conversations we might have on the street outside. We're not getting the message about why participation is so important. And so to Kayla's point, I think it's really important that we develop that. And I do think that government, I used to be in government for 27 years, I've been in Vodafone for 8. There's so much to learn, and that sort of interchange is so sort of rigid and sort of statutory. And I really do think there's much, much more we could do to develop new mechanisms. Bringing society into those conversations earlier will give us better policies, and having the closest possible sectoral cooperation and cooperation with government is going to be part of the way in which we tackle some of these problems.
Thank you, Richard. We've got 20 minutes left since I'm eating unilaterally 5 minutes of your 15-minute break afterwards. So my questions are now from the floor, please. Please indicate your interest. Give a premium to young people and people of the female persuasion. But in the absence of either, I'm going to start with the gentleman at the back there. And I'll take 3, and then we'll let our panelists be really quick. Tell us who you are.
Thank you very much. Radu Raghea from Romania Civil Society. In respect to, I would like to raise for all the panelists the issue of values. So, for example, when Russia was dealing with Europe on energy, and Europe said, look, we don't care about the values of Russia, when Mr. Khodorkovsky or Mr. Kasparov said something about the regime, the people here in Europe, some leaders said, we don't care. Now it's China. So for all the leaders, in respect to technology, do values matters? You have a partner which is a Maoist, Leninist, communist partner, who don't want to be a partner, who wants to run the world, because this is its ideology. It's a communist ideology that wants to run the world. Do you think that technology somehow doesn't matter? So it's something there which can be done with a partner that don't want to do partnership with you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next questioner. The lady in the middle here.
Thank you very much for your presentations. Oops, I'm
Who are
falling
you?
already. Magdalena Steringer, I'm from the College of Europe. And, you mentioned this danger of to human autonomy. And I was wondering, do you have any proposals already on how to counter this?
Right.
Thank you.
Counter it or live with it, make it livable with. Sir, here in the front. You say who you are?
Good afternoon. Ionan, United Nations Department of Safety and Security. Mrs. Pearlman, what is, in your opinion, the highest risk threat when it comes to AI on social unrest? And to the honorable politicians, former or current, why haven't these issues been addressed to the UN General Assembly or to the UN entities, organs, assemblies?
Right. Okay. Well, Kavya, 2 of those questions to you. Do you want to start? And let's be really snappy, and then we can get more.
Sure. So I actually recently spoke at the UNGA, at a panel that we talked about sustainability all the way to several different topics. So these issues are being brought to the limelight all the way to the United Nations. In fact, UNESCO, it's a Middle Eastern agency, has recently adopted Metaverse Safety Week, one of the first agencies to actually adopt and try to now advocate about spreading awareness of these technologies and the impact. Now, you talk about the highest sort of a risk of AI. And I have to admit, I'm not an artificial intelligence expert. My background is cybersecurity. And the risk that I really am thinking about here is not just artificial intelligence. It's, again, back to convergence. And that's where you'll start to see most of the AI initiative, now they are spinning to, AI-powered metaverse or the convergence, because that's exactly where we need to really be looking at, is combination of these technologies causing, and the risk is we potentially losing a grip on our reality. We are moving from post-truth to post-reality era. You guys have to look up Stable Diffusion. It's an artificial intelligence model that generates text to images, etc. That very basis could now be used to generate text to virtual reality. When you can potentially speak your virtual world into existence, that virtual world is also hackable. That virtual world can be manipulated. So now we're talking about, hey, what's real? What's not?
And this is within the free world. We're not talking about autocracy.
So the one thing that I want to mention here is, why are we talking about this? There is a term called Collingridge dilemma. Collingridge dilemma suggests that we have a double-bind problem. We have an information problem, which basically means the impacts cannot be predicted until the technology is extensively developed and widely used. So to your question, that is something that we cannot accurately put our finger on. However, then we have the second problem, which is the power problem. Control or change is difficult. Even with the most explainable AI, you will not be able to undo the harm that an algorithm has caused potentially on humans and societies. So the power problem is, this change is difficult once the technology is fully developed and entrenched in societies, in human beings. And that's why we discuss here today, because we want to anticipate it. Potential solutions. We are conducting tremendous research. We launched with a sense of urgency XRSI privacy and safety framework. So that's another something that I would say, partnership, collaboration, building the frameworks, etc.
Richard,
thank you.
Complete break with autocracies, no more partnering with China. Where would that leave you?
So I think both the US-China escalations and also obviously Russia-Ukraine have thrown back to our politicians the challenge of where can you afford, or where is it possible to be divergent and be separate, and I think it depends on what you're looking at as to where the answer lies. So the part, if you look at, I think green energy is quite a good news story in the sense that in the old days there wasn't an escaping where they had oil and gas to sell you, and not everywhere did, and therefore you had to buy it from those that did. I mean, obviously green energy offers us the chance for us to do the things for ourselves and reduce our dependence in that way. Where we are with China, I think, is in a global space where the widest possible access to markets, to innovation could be a good thing. I think we have to work harder at that. And so my perspective is that at the moment there are aspects of the way in which the supply chain is done, but there's also the global future of business and trade that ruling out 1.4 billion people now is something that would damage us all. But we do need to seek change. But that's a political battle, not a commercial battle. But we do have values, and we work on we work very hard. I think sometimes the idea that values is just for politicians. It's also for for companies. Values and ethics matter. You're doing what's right matters. Having human rights policies matter. Looking at the challenges offered by AI and thinking about them and developing policies for them matter. So it's not all about governments, but at that supra level it is.
I'm told we've lost Kira. Sorry about that. But Mark, meanwhile, what's the biggest risk with AI, we were asked, and would taking it to the United Nations do more good?
So let me first, on a more positive note, add that Europe has been incredibly successful in translating our fundamental values into our digital legislation. We can be proud to be global leaders when it comes to the regulation of digital markets and services. I personally am super proud of having led the negotiations on Digital Services Act and the European Declaration on Digital Rights and Principles. Now, I think these are incredibly important pieces of legislation because they make sure that what's illegal offline is clearly illegal also online, and they create mechanisms that can help enforce that. So I think the good news is that, yes, we are the world's greatest exporter of tech regulation. Mm-hmm. The not so good news is that we're not nearly as good at exporting our digital services. And this is, I think, something that right now the EU should focus on. Yes, autocracies have certain advantages over democracies. Look at privacy standards. There are things that you are not allowed to do with data here in Europe and the US, and I think that's the right thing. But China, on the other hand, can process data of 1.4 billion people in a very different and more, I would say, liberal way than we do. But at the same time, in the long run, what history teaches us is that our values prevail, and they are resistant to challenges, no matter how big they are.
Next round of questions. Gentleman at the far right side there with his little finger up. Yep. Microphone, please.
Thank you. You didn't forget me. I was not young enough for the first round, but I got the second. So I'm Carlo Brenner from...
Not female enough either, if I may say so.
How do you notice? So I'm Carlo Brenner from Intesa Sanpaolo, which is an Italian bank, present also in Ukraine with the Pravex Bank. And my question is the first one for Mr. Andrijanič. It's a kind of an easy one. So we're talking about China.
Yeah.
So tell me something to make me believe there is not a lost race against China for AI, in the sense that they started earlier with a strategy, and we are not there even. Like, you are in a strategic position for Europe, and you know that we are still looking for the right way to address technology, innovation, AI, and etc. We don't know. So maybe US is already forward, but we are not even ready.
And have we lost the AI race to China? Next question. Sir, sorry. In the front. No, sorry, that was it.
Okay.
That's your 15 minutes of fame. Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Jacob Wentz, and I'm a Fulbright scholar from the US. My question is related to privacy. When we look at regulation and policies related to disinformation, foreign interference, things like that, a lot of times these big tech companies cite privacy as a factor that makes them hesitant to sign on to those kinds of regulations. So I'm wondering where you see the balance between preserving this privacy and holding malicious actors accountable.
Thank you. Got time for one more question. Bonus points for somebody of the female persuasion. Nope. All right, that's it. Let's go in reverse order. Mark, you first.
Thank you. So, look, don't get me wrong. The US is still #1 when it comes to AI. But the gap between the US and China is diminishing by the day. So that's why I emphasize the need to work closely with our American partners, as well as with other democracies across the world. I think we should definitely, if the West is not big enough at the moment to counter the threats coming from China, then we should do our best to expand the West, and invite other democracies to join our alliance. And here I think India has a very special role to play. It's a huge country, it's a democracy, and it's got amazing tech talent. By the way, many Indians are running the biggest tech companies in the world, and this is something the US can be proud of. Now, the second thing was related to
privacy.
Privacy. So let me tell you an anecdote. When the war in Ukraine erupted, Russia obviously started a very comprehensive manipulation campaign all over Europe and also focusing on Central and Eastern Europe. And what turned out to be the case with all the social media platforms is that they have fairly good content moderation when it comes to big languages like German, like Spanish, like English. But when it comes to the languages of nations in Central and Eastern Europe, you know, they hardly had any feet on the ground, even in a country as big as Poland. So we made sure, as governments at that point, that social media companies need to increase their presence in all the countries within the EU so that all European citizens can be well protected from disinformation and misinformation.
Great. Please keep it really short because we're way over time and I see the moderator of the next session pacing the floor anxiously at the end. Kira, the question is to you, but I think the question about have we lost the AI race? Go ahead.
Honestly, I would concur on the AI aspect with my fellow panelists, but I do want to address the question, balance between privacy and accountability. And we're talking about incentivizing these companies to be pro-regulation, to be pro-privacy by design. And the key word here is trust. People are already willing to reject the vision of Mark Zuckerberg talking about the metaverse. There are a lot of people who are real skeptics. They don't want to believe in it. But whether they believe in the M word or not, the convergence is happening. Now, here is where we can demand, Europe, as well as global citizens can demand for trust. If they don't adopt privacy by design, if they don't create safeguarding human beings by design, then there is a matter of trust. We must reject entering these virtual environments then. And I think that's the unique opportunity as citizens, as Europe itself, we can demand better and demand for trustworthy ecosystems to be made. Facebook files you may have heard of. Mental health issues are stemming from the use of Instagram. Why should that be allowed anymore? Why should we not ask for proving, hey, don't code for engagement, code for human well-being? So those are the kind of things. Demand trustworthy systems, systems that make us better humans and not depressed, not cause mental health issues in teens, etc. And this is going to be more and more because with the immersive internet, the attack surface, the impact has moved from nodes, servers, algorithms, to our brains, to our living room, inevitably. So that's what we're looking at. And so it comes back to trust that will incentivize them.
Richard.
10 words, maybe 12. So trust by design, definitely. Security by design, definitely. Legislation where it's necessary but properly negotiated with the private sector. And also, keep looking for those technologies that help rather than hinder, encryption and others. So I don't think we've lost the race with China on AI, and I don't think we've lost the battle for
and include either. Civil society in that dialogue.
Absolutely.
Between regulators and
because if we don't do that, we end up with worse legislation, and legislators have to do it again. So the incentive is it's the right thing to do, but also it leads to better legislation.
Great. Well, listen, thank you very much to our panelists. Let me very quickly in 2 words say what my takeaways are. One, we haven't lost the tech race to China. 2, we can yet. 2, we can only deal with this on a transatlantic basis. And indeed, as somebody said, we need to widen the West as well to address these issues. We can't just regulate it in our own little corner, especially when we're regulating other countries, companies, and technologies. 3, we need to involve the private sector, be it users, be it NGOs, be it the mental health community or whatever, earlier on, upstream in this discussion about regulation and about where our technology is going. I'll leave it with that simply to say that Ukraine and we're very grateful to our two Ukrainian speakers, if neither of them is still with us. Ukraine is already having to solve in practice these things that we're talking about in theory. And so what happens in Ukraine, what comes out of Ukraine, will set us on a path. And I think that's something that we all need to recognize. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to the audience for questions. You now have a rather miserably short coffee break before you're all back here for Japte Hoopscheffer's wonderful session on the post-war future of Ukraine.